Trice, real name, no gimmicks. Put your bad self. Say it loud.
Hello, you're listening to the Art Daily Sideshow. I'm your host, Art Delinsky. Happy Black History Month. Don't forget, at the end of the month, I will have a Black History 2026 roundup. It's our annual Black History roundup. It'll be the second year that I'm doing it, so I'm actually pretty excited about it. I hope that you like the theme song because this is what I'm going to be using for the rest of the month. I don't know how many episodes I'll have, but as you can see, there's a tad bit more consistency coming out of me this time around, so I don't know, new year, new me, who knows? Last episode, we talked about Nicki Minaj's response to Don Lemon's live stream of anti-ICE organizers who were preparing, and later on, if you remember, entered a church to protest a clergyman who they believe also was moonlighting as an ICE agent for the local ICE field office in Minneapolis. A couple of weeks later, by the end of January, that's last Friday, after two failed attempts by the Department of Justice to charge Lemon, a grand jury in Minnesota indicted Lemon and 8 other individuals, including independent journalist Georgia Fort and Lemon himself, were arrested by federal agents over civil rights violations stemming from his coverage of the protest at City Church. The 2 violations are as following. Violation of the freedom of access to clinic entrances, or the FACE Act. This comes from like the 90s when there was a lot of Christian zealots, for lack of better words, who were going in front of abortion clinics. But the specific part that the grand jury said that Lemon violated is the portion that's protecting places of religious worship from force, threat, or physical obstruction. The next one is a conspiracy to violate rights of religious freedom at a place of worship inside the church, and injuring, intimidating, or interfering with the exercise of the right of religious freedom at a place of worship. That did happen from the protesters. That did not happen from Don. Like it or not, Don Lemon is a journalist. I don't like the guy. I don't think he's a professional. I have my personal opinions, which I will definitely get into. But he didn't do this. The protesters did, in fact, interrupt churchgoers. They did interrupt them from worship. And I know this because Don Lemon live streamed this. It's very clear that they were protesting, they were disrupting, that's part of the nature of a protest. Later on, we can talk about the details of it. But before we get into the nuances of it all and my opinions and what the grand jury actually said, I want to play this audio from Ellie Honig, who's a legal analyst and former assistant U.S. attorney, going over how the Department of Justice under Trump ended up on these specific charges, because it is quite an interesting turn of events.
There's a backstory into how they got this charge, because DOJ tried twice to charge Don before this.
That's where I was going next.
Rejected. Yeah. So let me lay it out for you. When you're a prosecutor, there's 2 ways you can charge somebody. You can either go to a grand jury, meaning 23 civilians, and get a majority of them to vote for it, or you can do what's called write up a complaint, where you have to lay out your probable cause, bring it to a judge. The judge then has to review and sign. So DOJ first tried the complaint. They brought it to a judge, and a federal magistrate judge looked at this and said, no, I'm not signing this. And that judge did sign it as to the other 3, but not to Don and not as to other people. And I'm sure the reason for that is the First Amendment, that it's not a crime for a journalist to cover a crime. Failing that, DOJ then went to the appeals court and said, well, you have to force them to sign this complaint. And the appeals court said, absolutely not. And failing that, now try 3, they've gone to a grand jury, and they've gotten a grand jury to issue a complaint, an indictment against Don. Now, you may say, you will hear surely DOJ say things like, well, civilians and normal people looked at this evidence and concluded there was probable cause of a crime. But I'm here to tell you, you've heard the old thing about a grand jury will indict a ham sandwich. It's largely true. Grand juries are spoon-fed whatever the prosecutor chooses to give them. There's no defendant in the room. There's no defense lawyer in the room. There's no cross-examination. There's no judge. And so it doesn't shock me. It surprises me, but it doesn't shock me that they were able to get, and you only need a majority in the grand jury, right? In a trial jury, you need unanimity. So here you need 12 out of 23. So they apparently have gotten this indictment. I don't think it's going to last. I think a judge is going to throw it out.
So that was Ellie Honig, who's a legal analyst and former assistant U.S. attorney, and also works at CNN, so where Don Lemon used to work. And it seems like they're still in good relations. Something that really stood out to me is just the fact that the DOJ went to a judge and a judge decided not to sign off on it. So they said, okay, we'll go to the lower courts. And then they said also, no, we're going to side with the judge. And then, the third time, they decided to go to the grand jury, which I didn't realize didn't do cross-examination. And you don't have to have a majority, unanimous. It has to be a majority. And there's no judge. I didn't realize that. That's kind of nuts. I'm going to read from the grand jury indictment from this Politico article. The indictment contends that Lemon broke the law because, and this is from the grand jury, that he was aware of the protesters' plan in advance and took steps to keep it secret before the demonstration began, a fact that he repeatedly disclosed on his live stream. Yeah, that's true. We literally saw that in the video that was just on a second ago. In the article continues to say that the grand jury also contended Lemon attempted to, quote, oppress and intimidate a pastor at the church who was, quote, largely surrounded, unquote, by Lemon and other defendants as Lemon allegedly, quote, peppered him with questions to promote the operation's message. Oh my God. Peppered him with questions? You mean interviewed him? Damn, that's dangerous, dude. You can't, this is 1984, man. 1984, you can't do this. Peppering someone with questions when you are a journalist is called interviewing. I'm sorry, I guess you can say journalist privilege or something. Do I like Don's style? No. Do I think he's asking good faith questions? Because I saw the live stream and the questions that he asked the pastor of the church, who is not the ICE agent, allegedly. He was asking him questions that were definitely steeped in agenda and not good faith questions. They definitely promoted the operations message, but that's Don Lemon, that's his agenda, that's his side, that's his job. He's literally doing his job, look at Tucker Carlson. I think that's a good contrast. He might be terrible as a journalist, in my opinion, just like Don Lemon, but they're both objectively journalists and are similarly have gone independent. I think Tucker was at Fox, I believe, and Lemon was at CNN. Tucker Carlson and Don Lemon. These sounds like freaking characters from a freaking Huckleberry Finn or some shit. And, they are what they are. Whether they're propagandists and for whom, that's subjective. And in my opinion, they're all peddling some sort of poison. But again, that's what journalism has largely become, in my opinion. Going back to the actual demonstration, being inside a church and protesting overall is a bad idea. It's not a good look. It's not a good look whether you are protesting against ICE, whether you are protesting against a war in the Middle East. It's never a good look to go as a rabid mob of angry people into any house of worship. We collectively have a bad history of doing that. And whenever that happens, I do believe that triggers something very, very primal in us. So don't do that, in my opinion. Not a good look. So that's why I think that the charges for the people who are protesting, not the journalists, the people who were protesting in this church, it's going to hold some more water, I think. And I can understand 100% why Don Lemon would want to report live from inside of the church. But again, and mostly for the same reasons, it's a bad look. It's a bad look for Don to be inside of the church while this disruption is happening. He could have been outside of the church, interviewing people as they were coming in and out. But was it illegal for him to be inside live streaming as a journalist, independent journalist? I don't think so. He legally, in my opinion, could do it. He's definitely protected by the First Amendment. And again, he's doing his job, but it's just not a good look. That's my point. It doesn't bode very well. And then the question of protesting inside a church because one of the clergymen was supposedly an ICE agent for the local field office, or an officer, or worked at the local ICE field office or something. Is there a moral or theological or religious ethical conversation to be had about whether someone who's a person of the cloth, can they be an ICE agent under the circumstances of how ICE has been operating in specifically Minneapolis? Yeah, there's definitely a conversation to be had there. I would love to actually hear that conversation, but that's not what that demonstration was. Was there a legitimate argument for Don Lemon to be there? Of course, that was newsworthy. There's been crazy news coming out of Minneapolis, you know? Were his questions good? No. That comes with the territory of Don Lemon doing journalism, you know? But even if you don't like Don, and same with Tucker Carlson, you can't take away the fact that they're journalists. Unfortunately, this is what journalism has has become. They have decades of bona fide, legitimate journalistic work, and it's not a matter of me respecting them or liking them or anything like that, just the objective truth. And another truth, you know, I'll wrap it up here, that I think the Trump administration is going to have to contend with is that they've made Don Lemon bigger than life. He is now the face of the, quote, tyrannical, fascistic, anti-free press administration that is the Trump administration. They've made him into almost a martyr by targeting and charging 8 people, at least three of them were black journalists, including Don Lemon, who's a famous gay and black journalist, former CNN newscaster, a news station that Trump has repeatedly attacked, who's been openly anti-Trump for almost a decade. I mean, you've gave him the career boost of a lifetime, Trump. Is Trump in such a blind rage that he's willing to do this type of very public, political and targeted attack of Don Lemon using the DOJ, which kind of to me seems like a waste of resources? Or is he an ally trying to give brother a boost on this here Black History Month? Truly, way to go. Like, something tells me it's the former, not the latter, but a girl can dream. I mean, it seems obvious that Trump was trying to send some sort of message by doing this in such a public way during such a charged time. Definitely sends a message, but I think that it also is backfiring a little bit and is causing people to look up to Don Lemon in a way that I don't think people should, because he sucks as a journalist. But, like it or not, he's a journalist nonetheless. My name is Art Delinsky, and I've been talking with you about the Don Lemon arrest that happened on Friday, January 30th, following his live stream of an anti-ICE protest inside of a Minneapolis church. You are tuned into the Art Deli Sideshow. I will be back sooner than later. Happy Black History Month. If you want to questions, comments, concerned, hit up the Instagram. And also, if you can, like, subscribe. I'll see you soon. Bye.